Energy, a volatile sector in 2021, and with an upcoming OPEC meeting kicking off the year in January, what can investors expect for the sector going forward? Let's bring in Halima Croft, Head of Global Commodity Strategy at RBC Capital Markets and a CNBC contributor. Halima, great to see you as always. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
We'll come to OPEC in a moment, but the first big question I have, both short-term and medium-term, is quite how bad the supply crunch is going to get in Europe. What's your views there?
I mean, I think the key thing to watch in terms of the European potential energy crisis is really what happens with Russia-Ukraine. I mean, that could really cause an already difficult situation for European consumers to get just that much worse. So if we did see Russian troops cross the border into Ukraine, you could really see, really severe sanctions being put in place on Russia, and Russia potentially responding by cutting off gas supplies into Europe, like they did in 2009. So I think this is the most important issue, if you're concerned about European gas markets, is what happens with the Russia-Ukraine story.
Obviously, in the short term, a fleet of LNG ships from the U.S. are heading over to try and ease short-term pain. Is that only ever going to be a stopgap measure, or is there actually a market there for various U.S. LNG producers to find permanent long-term buyers in Europe?
Well, I think one of the really interesting questions going forward is going to be, are we actually going to see greater efforts to have, storage of gas? I mean, one of the things that we don't have is we don't have an SPR for gas. Gas storage is difficult. There are technical challenges with it. And what we've seen this year is that when you have, Asian demand running high, when you have European demand running high, there is a real question about, can you get enough gas into the system? And so, yes, I do think you're going to see more cargoes diverting into Europe away from Asia. But I think if we want to think about energy security over the medium term, we do need to think more about potential storage issues for gas.
Halima, clearly WTI had pulled back to 60 or just below. It's back to the mid to high 70s, Brent in the high 70s as well. Might OPEC change that or not?
Well, I mean, I think that OPEC's going to remain under pressure from the Biden administration, because if you look where oil prices are right now, I mean, they still are very elevated. The Biden administration is very, very concerned about inflation. They're very concerned about rising energy prices. And so I do think you're going to have the Biden administration putting OPEC under pressure to put more barrels onto the market. The question is, though, if oil prices continue to rise, is OPEC going to be reaching the upper limit in terms of how many more barrels they can deliver? I mean, you have a couple OPEC countries already capped out. Spare capacity is really sitting in countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Russia, and Saudi dominates this story. And the question is, if we do get a supply crunch, how many more barrels is Saudi willing to offer to the market?
Halima, thanks so much, as always, for joining me. Much appreciated.